We're live.
We're live. Welcome, everyone. Today is Tuesday, November 1st. Welcome to the OpenJS Foundation Standards Working Group. Our fearless chair, Jory, is out today, so we'll try to manage without her. Let's see if you all want to jump in to the agenda on our repo. We have a few things. And I've missed the last two, so I'm going to count on you all to bring me up to speed. Issue number 191, the public calendar for the Web Standards Group meetings is available. If you look, Jory has a link. I know I've actually added it to my calendar. I don't know if you all have added it to yours, but it's a good way to sort of air traffic control what's going on and to track things. Everybody. Okay. No questions, comments. We've got a reminder, so let's move on. The concise guide to participating in web standards, work in progress. Michael Champion, do you want to give us an update on this since I had missed that working session?
Well, we discussed this, 6 weeks ago, the last time we met. There were some good, I had put out a sort of a total straw man that people critiqued, gave some good critiques of, and suggested sort of a different focus or different sort of structure, and we threw out some questions. One, I found a bug. How do I know if it's a standard, the implementation, the docs, or something else? And then I have a feature idea request for the web platform. Where do I go? And so anyway, those two we agreed at the last meeting were real questions that people would ask, and that's the kind of thing we're trying to answer in here. So at some point in the last month, I tried to flesh that out with some text. I haven't seen much in the way of critiques or further edits, but I pasted the URL to the document we're working in chat. So either now or asynchronously, suggest. My sense is that my prose is too verbose and needs to be, trimmed down to be more concise, guide-ish. I think that's just having somebody else take a stab at that would probably be helpful. Anyway, I'm not trying to be the benevolent dictator of this document, even though that's kind of the way it looks at the moment. But I'm happy to keep doing the work since I don't have a day job. But I would definitely appreciate some feedback, better, more questions, better answer to these questions, wordsmithing to make it whatever, to take out the verbiage. Make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this is drawing inspiration from the OpenSSF on their best practices working group. They have concise guides. It looks like it lives on GitHub. So I love setting a little goal for us, maybe to publish something. Do we want to set a goal to have something published and then weigh in any edits before then?
That sounds great. What is the ideal collaboration flow on this document? Should we just add comments, edit suggestions? Should we just go in and edit?
I mean, Google Docs has edit history. So feel free to go in and edit. Even if you throw away something, it can be recovered. Or we could put this into GitHub and have issues on it if we want to. I'm not sure why we are doing it in Google Docs rather than GitHub, but so as the de facto editor, I'd say, whatever works for you, as long as it's in writing. So either issues there is a GitHub issue in it. We could, we could put comments or editorial suggestions in the document. But I would say just go ahead and edit it, especially if it's wordsmithing.
About GitHub versus Google Docs, I find that Google Docs works better for like initial iteration that tends to happen, like that tends to involve bigger changes, faster changes. Once it's more mature, then we could move it to GitHub and polish it there. I don't know what maturity level you think it is right now.
Yeah, I agree with that workflow. I don't have a good sense of what the maturity level is. I've just been kind of doing this, well, like I said, because I don't have a day job, and nobody else seems to have picked it up and run with it.
I think from agility, why don't we keep GitHub and then with a goal to publish it in 2 weeks when we meet again?
Okay, works for me.
And agility, does that work for you?
Yeah, definitely setting a deadline makes sense.
That's how I roll sometimes. With consensus, obviously.
Yeah, consensus being lack of objection. Yeah. Yeah, no. So I mean, the first iteration got some pushback. That hey, these aren't really questions that real web developers care about, and we sort of reworked it. Anyway, you can see where it stands is. Go ahead. Said whoever was saying something.
I don't think anyone was.
Okay. Well, are people looking at it? I mean, do we want to just sort of? So I found a bug. How do I know if it's a standard, the implementation, the docs, or something else? So the answer I gave was, well, first find the bug database for the standard and check to see whether somebody has reported the bug. Does that seem like the first step, or?
I would say the first step is to actually look up the standard, because otherwise you don't know if it's a browser bug or a standards bug.
That's very good. That's a very good point. Read the actual text.
Jordan, you just did a work. Oh, sorry. Jordan just did a workshop with Heymanth on how to read a spec. Do you think there's a broad knowledge that if you tell people to do that, they know how to do that?
Right.
I think people are.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No,
okay.
Go ahead.
I think people are lost even in which spec the feature in question is in. Like, how do I find the right spec? Like, even that question is non-trivial. It seems trivial to us if we've been in standards for a while, but actually, even to me, like, it's not always obvious which spec contains each feature. So I would say probably the first step is to look up the feature itself, like on MDN, which often links which spec contains it, and then like go to the spec through that. Like, at least to me, that is how I find like which spec contains each feature. Like MDN seems to be the best source for that. I've even written a bookmarklet, like go to spec. I open an MDN page, I press the bookmarklet, and it takes me to the spec.
Yeah, I think that's great. That's great feedback.
Mhm.
I'm just putting rough notes
Yep,
in the
I see.
document.
Mhm.
Um, um, so the how do we read it? I think we had, did we have, we had a, how do we read a spec? Okay. Well, I'll just paste in the text to the how do I read it?
We actually have, Jordan, I believe we recorded your workshop. We have that on OpenJS World. I'll have to check the YouTube channel, but we could also link back to that.
Actually, it's on my list of things to watch, so I don't even know how terrible it is yet. Sure, sounds good.
Yeah, well, could you paste in a link to it, or you want to, sir, you want to review it before you even point us to it?
I mean, I've had enough time that I can't pull anything up on that, but yeah, I'll try and track down the link and drop it in the Zoom chat.
Okay, great. Let's see, where are we here? Okay, so okay, so I've got a problem. How do so I figure out which spec defines the feature. I read the spec. And then if I'm convinced that the language of the spec is not either unambiguous or doesn't match what my implementation, browser, library, whatever does, then at some point you find the bug database associated with a spec to see if anybody's reported. Does that make sense?
I mean, if we're just talking about JavaScript, I would probably go for something with a lot more steps in it. Like, first, I would say, like, which environment are you having your problem in? Is it a browser or
okay.
like or Node or Deno, or right? And then, like, the first thing would be, does the feature you're using also exist on browsers, or if you're in a browser, also exist in Node or Deno or whatever? If it exists across things, then it's either part of the HTML spec or part of the JavaScript spec. If it exists only in the environment you're in, then, right, like if you're in a browser, then it might be the browser spec, but that defines it. But and then if you want to figure out if your browser is broken, try it in another browser, right? And like, so you kind of have all these debugging steps assuming that you don't know where the source of truth for your thing is, right? Because like, I don't know, it's somewhat complex, because then you have things like set timeout, which are part of the HTML spec, but Node did its own thing that's kind of like it, and so did Deno. And like, that's not part of the JavaScript language, even though a lot of people think it is. And like, where do you go to report those problems? So I think that if we want to provide simple instructions, then I think we would have to start with, first, let's assume you've already figured out that the thing you're looking at is a JavaScript language feature. Go here. If you've already figured it out, it's a web browser feature. Go here, right? But the steps of how to figure it out are, I think, relatively complex and environment specific. I'll stop talking in circles.
Yeah. Well, so maybe there isn't a concise answer. I don't know. I don't. Anyway, I'm just trying to execute the will of the community here, not
Right.
Maybe we should include examples.
Pardon?
Maybe we should include examples. Like, for example, you notice that you can't do math on FR units in calc. How do you look up, like, the whole process, like, you know, how finding which spec it is, finding whether this is actually in the spec or if it's a browser bug, reporting the bug if it's actually a browser bug, which that one is, finding whether it's already reported. Like, you know, maybe that's not a good example, but like taking some actual thing from like start to finish and describing each step might make this the everything seem a little bit more concrete.
I was just going to chime in here. In plant and animal identification, there's like a process called dichotomous key, and it's a series of questions like this that you'd ask. You're like, does it have 3 leaves? Does it have 2 leaves? Does it have? And it helps you, you know, get to identifying what the biology is. But I'm imagining there could be a similar type of schema here.
Yeah, like a flow chart. That's sort of what I was envisioning, I think, but you've expressed it better. But that's what I meant about like the first steps of the flow chart are many and complex. So like if we want to start from the end, like from the destinations of the flow chart, then like we can get a lot of things covered before we get into the complex parts. But it is unfortunately just a very complex reality. If you don't understand anything about your problem and you're trying to figure out what your problem is, that is a daunting task.
I mean, so I like all these suggestions. I certainly can't commit the time and don't have the expertise to really do a credible job of you know, some of this, you know, untangling the complexity. So I don't know, maybe 2 weeks is, well, publish in 2 weeks may or may not be feasible for, you know, the kind of work we're talking about here, but that would be a very iterative community process to you know, untangle the, you know, the dichotomization or the flow chart or whatever you want to call it. So anyway, I mean, go ahead.
Do we want, if there's some specific areas you want, for example, that last one, do we want to just put a notice in the standards channel on Slack saying, hey, friends, need your help in a couple of areas?
Yeah, I think we would probably want the document a little more. So a goal of in 2 weeks having the document be a place where, hey, we've got kind of this this first attempt and we really need your help on, you know, what kind of problems you're having and, you know, what kind of things could a document like this help you with? So
We could do 4 weeks if that's better, whatever, you know, I was just throwing out something that's, it is complex.
Yeah, it just depends on who's willing to devote how much time to it. Well, if we're snowed in, if I'm snowed in, maybe. Anyway, I'm happy to do the mechanical work, but I'm just not in this world day to day enough anymore to really have a good sense of what the target audience needs and what technical depth of answers they would find helpful.
And do we even know if that information lives elsewhere? Because these are concise guides, and if we can link to something else, you know.
Oh yeah, well.
I will point out that 4 weeks clashes with Thanksgiving. I don't know how much of a factor that is.
Oh, yeah, that'll be a slow week.
Well, I mean, I think trying to make concrete progress every 2 weeks certainly is a good project
Worthy,
plan goal.
definitely a worthy goal. You've made a lot of progress. I think I missed the last meeting. It's amazing. Cool. All righty. Thank you so much. All right. So are we ready to move on?
Yeah, unless people have specific questions, comments, suggestions. Yeah, I'm ready to, I'm done. Thanks.
Cool. So next up, submit foundation ballot for W3C board election. I do know that happened.
Yeah, I closed the issue.
You closed the issue. Got it. Okay. Jerry voted on time. That she did. Awesome. Okay. Next up, define terms for SME participation. Community fund. Luke is actually working on at least the reimbursement process for community fund, which is a little clunky across our cross-project council and lives in a few different places. For any of you who have traveled on behalf of the foundation, you've all experienced our clunky process.
It wasn't too bad.
We have some information. Some people are, that's just getting reimbursed on Expensify. The process for approvals before and after, there's been some confusion. So we're working on getting some more clarity on that and then probably archiving some of the old information as well.
I think one of the things that has always seemed, even though I haven't gone through the process myself, that has seemed tricky about it is that you have to give an estimate of the price. And then by the time you get all the approvals you need, the price has changed. Like guaranteed, it'll go up a little bit, if not a lot. And that alone, even if it's like $10, some people are going to be really gun shy about just pulling the trigger and updating that. So like something that it would be nice to have something that was more like, yes, you're approved, as long as it's like within what we all find reasonable and can search ourselves for a coach, ticket or similar transportation to the event, right? Like just, and like keep the dollar amount roughly out of it, but just because it's always going to be like, all of us can just pull up like Travelocity or Google or whatever and look for flights and then be like, yeah, that's in the ballpark. And so like, it might be nicer to just have us say, yes, go ahead and buy your ticket. And then when they put the amount, they can update it and then we can confirm the amount and then finalize it. Something like that. I don't know.
Or you could propose like a budget, like roughly I expect it to be in that sort of range. And then when you book the actual flight, you would know what the actual cost is.
That would probably be fine too. Because I mean, especially since the person could just do the search first and get a sense. Go ahead, Leah, sorry.
Yeah, duly noted, and I'll consider that. Maybe there's some other thing, Robin, like we could say, put a line in there that says within, we realize that prices may, fluctuate, and as long as it's sort of, within a reasonable 20% or whatever something reasonable, but that all makes so much sense.
Yeah. I think just linking the standards. I mean, the standards is part of the cross-project council, but the CPC already had done some work on just eligibility criteria, which I put a link. Active participant of one of the projects or groups. And then again, there's the process, that's the clunky. But if you see our standards participation applications, it's blank when probably, if you all are looking at the same thing I'm looking at, it probably is very similar to the collaborators applications. And that's maybe we need to define if that's the same or different, because this, whoops, the chat didn't go through. That's weird. There we go. Take a look at that link and you'll see the CPC fleshed out the section for collaborators, but the standard section is blank.
Yeah, I remember looking at that document when I did my travel fund application and noticing that it was blank there, but I just like looked at the other PRs and did something similar.
Yeah. So is it the CPC that approves the standards SME, or is it the standards working group that approves the standards SME, right? So that's the question. Thoughts, Joe, Jordan? Right. I'll be right back. Yeah, because we had another collab space too on the travel fund, and people are like, oh, I didn't know this person, but the collab space had recommended this person for travel. So we're seeing it kind of pop up around our community spaces. So I don't know if it's a problem we need to fix at the CPC level or make a recommendation from each working group. But I would sort of tend to think that each sort of working group or collab space would make a recommendation on who they want to send and support.
That makes sense to me.
Yeah. So a concrete scenario, the 4 W3C advisory board members who were elected to the board of directors are all resigning from the advisory board, and there will presumably be a special election to fill their seats. I mean, it's quite plausible that somebody in our community I think Jory and Brian have declined. I'm available in principle. But somebody more active in the trying to drive an agenda like the relationship between the JavaScript open source community and the standards community, I think would be a great candidate there. So anyway, but assuming, so would that say one of us got elected to the advisory board, would we basically just apply for reimbursement on a case-by-case basis? With the standards working group kind of designate this person as kind of like we did with Leah, as somebody who is representing us in some sense, or being sponsored by us? What would the kind of decision-making workflow be there?
Yeah, that's where I think it's nice to have its own section, because I think it's with the CPC, it's on a case by case, and you're supposed to get pre-approved, although it's confusing. But if somebody has a year, the standards working group, for example, could say, no, we're going to fund somebody for the year, right? And so then they can just be reimbursed. It's different than a community person going to speak at an event or participate in a collab summit. So maybe you do need your own sort of criteria just for some agility. But I think at least a yearly renewal is important, just from a budget perspective, budget planning.
So then that person wouldn't need to submit like requests on a per meeting basis. It would just be approved like in advance for the whole year.
I still think, well,
You'd still have to submit the paperwork like you would
Yeah.
in
Right,
any
of course.
organization, but yeah, there would be an assumption that it's approved.
yeah. And so you may say there are 4 meetings or however many meetings,
Yeah.
you know, once it gets to, if it were to be like 10, then that would be difficult from a budget perspective because we have a finite budget. So. But as you can see, the work that the CPC did on eligibility criteria. Again, I'd want you all to determine how you would determine the eligibility criteria. Also know that we do have DEI scholarships as well. So there's always room for that in all of our working groups and collab spaces. If you have somebody that you're mentoring or who is coming up the ranks who may need that. So do we want to capture some notes on our recommendations for eligibility, making it a little more, making the process smoother for our SMEs?
You thinking anything in particular?
Just what I've heard here, you
Yeah.
know, so using Leia for an example, be the rep for XYZ standards organization, pre-approved for the year to represent the foundation, or an advisory board. If, you know, our OpenJS standards working group has a rep on the advisory board, boom, for the year, X meetings. Yeah. And maybe, Joe, I don't know how you'd feel, would this group be the approvers on the per budget, or would this, because again, the CPC folks don't often have that visibility.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I could imagine the standards group would propose or recommend, and then the CPC approves or something, but I would imagine that the CPC would largely just defer to the standards group.
Yeah.
That sounds like how it will work to me, which is
I
fine.
think it would work better. And Luke, do you think we're going to go to LFX? I mean, I think that was sort of the vision.
Yeah, I've mentioned that. So it's funny, you know, you send emails and then you get back replies that are a little bit different than like what you actually asked. So I've mentioned many times like, hey, you know, here's that same link that you just shared with these LFX documentation that was worked on. And what I've gotten back was we might use bill.com, which is different than Expensify, even though some people were suggesting that maybe we should just re-up the Expensify, which I think would probably mean like every time someone filed would basically be a $10 fee for that month for them to be a user, is kind of what I got from Jory. Said that's why we weren't using it, because they would have to be an official user. So I'll have a meeting probably after we get back from the member summit to hash it out. But there's lots of ideas in these threads and just trying to bring it together. But seems like right now they want us to use bill.com for this. But
Okay.
you know, maybe the back end, maybe that's the back end and the front end could be the LFX, to be determined.
Yeah, I think the issue we had with LFX was it has to be a non-Linux Foundation employee who hits the button to approve and disperse funds. So that puts a lot of, you know, a lot of responsibility on one person, not responsibility, time, I would say, more time. We want to have our OpenJS CPC bookkeeper.
I think Joe just
Like
raised his
nothing.
hand. I saw him volunteer.
I
there.
saw Joe.
Or were you scratching your head? I saw.
He's sitting on his hands, I think. Jordan, did you have something? No.
No, I don't think so.
Why?
Is the idea with Bill.com that people seeking reimbursement will have to submit an invoice and then get paid as like through that invoice?
We always still need receipts regardless. That's the one thing, you know.
Right. But if you submit an invoice, I mean, I'm not a tax expert, so I might be wrong, but my impression is that if you submit an invoice, then it's basically tax-wise registered as income. And then when you do your taxes, you can also like list the same receipts as expenses and have that deducted. But with the current process, it's basically a reimbursement from the get-go. So you don't even have to like declare it as income because it's not income, it's a reimbursement. And for the folks that are in the US under a visa, listing things as income and then subtracting from them is a problem. Like I've done it for other reimbursements, like, you know, Boku was co-funding my travel and Boku required an invoice, but it always makes me a little bit worried. And I know that this is the case with like most people that are here on a work visa, because it's a work or a student visa that has the same restrictions. Because like if at some point in the future, like USIS might decide to look too closely to your tax returns and say, why do you have all this income from US source companies? Because that's not technically allowed.
Well,
I don't know how much of a
reimbursements aren't income and aren't taxable generally. And if they are taxable, then you'd have to be paying the taxes even if it didn't show up as income, and it's still on you to file that appropriately.
So my understanding is there are two ways for a company that reimburses you to do it. One way, it's basically a reimbursement from the get-go and you don't have to declare it as income. The other way is you invoice them and then they pay it the same as any regular invoice. And in that case, you have to declare it as income. And then you also—
right, because it's like a consulting income. Sure.
Exactly. And that is a problem for those of us that
Sure.
are here on a visa.
But I guess I wouldn't assume that that's how Bill.com or any other expensing solution would work. Like you might have to provide a receipt, but like filing an expense report is not automatically is not the same as sending an invoice necessarily. So I certainly agree with you. Like we should not be reimbursing people's expenses in such a way that it's considered income. Like we can absolutely use something that takes receipts and validates them, right? But like, yeah, I mean, I think that I feel like that's an important concern that should be distinct from the vendor that we use to manage this stuff or the website we use to manage this stuff, is that we should definitely not be paying it out as income. That also would have an issue for US citizens as well, because that affects our taxes too. So like, I don't think you'll find anyone who wants that to be treated as income. So I'm on board with that as a concern. I would be suspicious. I would be surprised if Bill.com uniquely created that problem.
Okay. I mean, my understanding is that Bill.com primarily works by creating invoices, but not expense reports. But I'm not an expert on this, so I could be wrong.
This is good feedback for us as we're trying to sort it out. So I appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah, I've noted that, and I'll definitely bring this up and make sure that we don't create that issue for anybody with whatever solution gets implemented.
Mm-hmm. And then we'll work on language, I think, not just for standards working group, but the other collab spaces and working groups as well, from a process perspective, and make suggestions. I think that's all on our agenda today. Is there any other business, anything open? What's the one? We have one PR open. What's that?
There is actually something.
Yeah.
So tag nominations end next week, November 8th. So I wasn't sure what I should do, like who I should ask, if like, does OpenJS want to nominate me again? Should I open an issue somewhere?
We had an issue open for you the first time, correct?
Yes, and
Yeah.
I cannot find it. I've searched everywhere.
Oh, no. I do remember.
Hmm.
It was Brian Cardell that opened it.
Right.
I think.
Really was an issue? I don't remember it being an issue, but I
Was it not an issue?
conversation. I don't recall it being an issue. I mean, I thought it was more of a series of DMs, but
No. There was definitely a public conversation somewhere.
okay.
There were DMs as well, I believe, before the
Yeah.
public conversation,
Yeah.
but there was
Mhm.
definitely a public conversation, and I cannot find it.
Are you up for re-election in the upcoming
Yeah.
tag election?
I am. Yes, my 2-year term is ending.
Do you want to be on the tag again?
I think so. I mean, it's a lot of work and it's a lot of unpaid work, but also I think it's important work that needs doing. So I decided if I can find support, then I'm willing to run again.
Do you need more than just travel support?
I think travel is fine. I have no hopes of other support,
Yeah, I mean, Elika
especially in this
spent as much
recession.
time beating the bushes for support as she did. Yeah. When she was on the AB.
I know I was looking for that issue as well. So then I think the question is, does somebody want to open an issue to nominate her? Do you want to self-nominate? I think we tend to go for self-nominations in our world. What do y'all think?
It would be nice to find the existing issue so that there's a continuous trail of like, this
I
was the
agree.
previous discussion. And
I agree.
maybe I could ask Brian, maybe he remembers where this was posted.
Mhm.
When in doubt, ask Brian.
Sorry?
When
Brian
in
Cardell.
doubt. Oh, Brian Cardell, other Brian.
Yeah. We have an encyclopedia, Brian Warner. He still dips in every week, maybe, to help.
Yeah.
He's our encyclopedia historian. Okay, well, we'll look for that. So are folks looking? Where is that? Do a Slack search too. I see your travel fund. Oh, here it is. I see a message. It was a nomination on your, well, you had your personal, you had a blog. Did you mention it? Did you link to it in your blog?
I linked to OpenJS as a whole. I don't think I linked to that particular thread.
Yeah, let's see. Your statement.
Yeah, OpenJS Foundation just links to the homepage. There was my statement from last year. Not last year, 2 years ago. And I've also written a statement for this year, though it's currently in a Google Doc. But I can share it in the issue.
So There we go. I see it. I found it.
Yay!
Yeah, it's good old Slack
it.
search. Let's see. I think that's it.
Yes, it was by Brian.
Mhm.
It seems to have all the keywords I was looking for, so I'm not sure why it wasn't coming up.
Hmm.
So should I like open that issue and post there? Should I open a new issue and just link to it?
I don't know. Team, what do you think?
Makes sense to me.
I don't have a strong preference, but anything that makes sense out of those options sounds good.
Put the agenda tag on it so we don't lose it again.
I
Yeah.
will put the agenda tag on it, but by the time the next call rolls around, it will be past the deadline for
Too late.
nominations.
Okay, what's your deadline?
November 8th, exactly a week.
Okay. So then we should flag it in Slack too, so in case people don't see it.
Yeah. So the workflow right now is I create an issue and then post it in the Slack, or do you post it in the Slack?
I could do it, or I'd love one of you all community members to post it in Slack. I'm going to volunteer Michael or Jordan to post it in Slack.
Sure. Which link do you want posted? This
I-
issue?
Gonna open,
Oh, okay.
I'm going to open an issue.
I'll
you're
post
gonna
that in Slack.
you're going to link to your old issue, right? To your, not old, your
Yes.
previous issue. Great. And then Jordan will flag it for the folks in Slack.
You got it.
Awesome.
And it'll presumably be on the agenda for the next standards call.
I
That's 2
suppose,
weeks.
yeah.
It's passing.
Yeah. Yeah, I was planning to bring it up in the previous call, but then it was canceled.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Great. We got a lot done
Yeah.
today.
No, I appreciate that you've gotten involved in this group, Leah. That was
Yeah, it took me a while to hear about its existence, because like last time I was nominated by Brian, and like he just came to me and he was like, OpenJS wants to nominate you. Are you okay with that? I was like, yeah, that sounds great. And I never heard about this group until like
okay.
a year in, or actually more.
Yeah.
But I'm glad it exists. I really love participating in this group.
No, likewise.
Okay. Well, if there's no other business, I think we could call it to a close.
Thank you
I'm
all.
gonna go eat the leftover Halloween candy. That's on my lunch agenda.
Already eaten everything that except what my kids don't want, which we'll see what that is.
They don't have to hide it from you. That's good. Not
No,
yet.
they don't. I'm respectful about it.
Nice. Awesome. Okay, cool.
Cool.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Bye.